So we're ready to start vacuuming the gravel as well as address the filter sock in this reef filter. First thing we need to do is turn off the system. That's done with that single switch on that power switch, the one that controls all the electricity to the system. One of the things that we found last week when we arrived to do a follow-up was the protein skimmer wasn't working. And upon closer examination, it was determined that there's a problem that's occurred with the water pump. These are one of those submersible water pumps. And for whatever reason, it's no longer producing electricity or conducting electricity, which in turn means it isn't working. So we've got to replace the pump for the protein skimmer today as well. And of course, then there's the cup for the protein skimmer. It must have worked at least halfway through that cycle. It's got about a quarter cup of goo in there, pea soup green colored stuff.
A protein skimmer's job is to drive organic compounds out of the water.
We've also had a micron sock in the filter during the cycle period. These are good for trapping out particles, what they call polishing the water. But the reality is they're way too fine. They plug up too fast. This is the largest. It's a 200 micron sock. And since this is only addressed every 2 weeks, this becomes plugged relatively quickly. So we're going to rinse it out, but I don't know if I'm going to really put it back in.
This micron sock's job is to trap out fine particles, things such as dust particles and small items floating in the water.
So as I mentioned, the protein skimmer, the water pump itself seemed to have failed, but the cup has driven out a quarter cup of goo. Protein skimmer is a very important component on the reef tank. It will drive out organic compounds before they're dealt with by the bacteria. So it almost circumvents a lot of the debris from becoming nutrients in the system. You just have to make sure that it's operating properly. We're going to go ahead and clean out the cup here, and then we'll replace that water pump and get that unit back up and running.
A protein skimmer's basic operation is through the use of heavy aeration. The air bubbles produced have the ability to attract the organic compounds to the surface of the bubble. The bubble rises to the top of the protein skimmer, in this case the cup, and pushes those organics literally out of the system.
So we've decided not to put that pleated or that micron sock back into the system. Not only do I not have a clean one here, but even if I did, they just progressively become plugged up faster each time. They're just too fine, really, for a general aquarium application. Maybe when we got done here, we could put it in and filter out those small particles so to make it nice and clean, and then within a couple of hours take it out. Because beyond that, it just becomes restricted, and the water just bypasses and goes around it. So what good is it really at that point? So we're going to go ahead and put the lid back on, and now we're going to replace the water pump for the protein skimmer.
The water pump not only moves the water, but it's also the mechanism that generates the air bubbles or the aeration in the skimmer.
That's the water pump right there. It's got a special little valve on the inlet side that is called a Venturi valve. What it does is as it's sucking water in, it restricts that water, creating a high pressure zone. Just beyond that high pressure zone is a small little perpendicular air valve. And as the water, which is high pressure, passes over that little valve, it's now changing to a low pressure because of the restriction. And it in turn sucks the air in and beats it up as it pulls it into that impeller assembly inside the pump. That beat up air and water is now discharged out directly into the protein skimmer. And that's how this Venturi protein skimmer actually works.
The water pump sits right alongside the protein skimmer and through the use of an elbow discharges the water and air directly into the skimmer.
We also have a bag of activated carbon down here. We're going to go ahead and change this. Activated carbon helps remove the colors and odors from the water itself. Activated carbon, or you might know it as charcoal, is actually ground up charcoal, a few other ingredients mixed in with it, and baked at extremely high temperatures. What you end up with is a filter media that's full of lots of nooks and crannies. Those nooks and crannies act as little magnets, and they attract organic compounds, the things that cause the water to become yellow, or the things that cause water to have odors. So we're going to put some new activated carbon in the system. We'll put it in this filter bag right here, and we'll lie it down in the filter below.
Activated carbon is probably one of the most commonly used types of filter medias for filtering many different types of water.
Rinse that out a little bit, and it's ready to go. So it's now time to begin to vacuum that sand. We've decided not to pursue the live sand bed, feeling that unless it's properly taken care of, it's just going to become another portion in the aquarium that holds on to nutrients, thus leading to another algae problem. So we're going to go ahead and on every service vacuum this gravel and forego the live sand bed, or what some might call a natural denitrator. The reason we're doing it is we've never had any success with the live sand bed in the past. So we're going to go ahead and start vacuuming the gravel now.
My intent by vacuuming the sand is basically the same as a fish tank with gravel. We're going to try to remove the debris that ultimately would become nutrients within the system, and hopefully that will lessen the amount of potential algae growth down the road. After taking 20 gallons out, it's time to put 20 gallons of new salt water back into the tank. We'll pour in each 5-gallon jug one at a time.
Since this tank is serviced from the backside, I don't have the advantage or the luxury of seeing from the front side. So what I'm going to do is put those new mushroom corals in now before I turn the water system on. That way I can see through the surface and know where I'm positioning the corals.
These are simple mushroom corals. They're actually in the anemone family, but look like a simple little round disc. There's anywhere from a half a dozen to maybe 24 of mushrooms on each individual rock. Once they acclimate to the system, they'll grow to 1 inch to 2 inches in diameter. Typically, these are referred to as metallic mushrooms, and they range from green to blue to purple and sometimes red with little blue spots. They're very attractive and serve as a nice splash of color down around the bottom of the tank. Eventually, assuming they do well, they will multiply and spread out across the bottom of the tank, giving kind of a meadow of mushrooms look. And now with the mushroom corals in the tank, we can turn the water system back on and begin to circulate the water within the aquarium.
So you can see here, the protein skimmer is already producing foam or organics. Now that's the result of one of two things. The fact that it probably hasn't worked for the last week, maybe 2 weeks, and two, it's got a much stronger water pump on there, so it's probably doing a little bit better job. Beyond that, you can attempt to make an adjustment with a telescopic discharge, but all that's going to do really is just cause the unit to overflow. You can't increase the water pump, so buying the protein skimmer with a strong water pump and sizing the protein skimmer properly, I guess, is the only way of increasing the effectiveness of protein skimming. It's a phrase that I just have a real hard time with. The reality is, you've only got so much room inside this cabinet to place not only the filter but the protein skimmer. So why these guys tend to promote these monster huge protein skimmers, I mean, I understand that they may work better, but if they don't fit the application, what good are they? So anyhow, and as with most reef tanks, there are chemicals or supplements, in particular calcium and pH buffer, that go into the tank. It's now time to add those. And for those of you that had a problem with me introducing it directly into the tank, here's the little measuring cup, and we're going to put 2 cups of each solution 1 and solution 2 into the tank.
A calcium supplement is one of the most important additions into the coral reef tank. Knowing that majority of the corals use calcium one way or another in the building of their skeletons. The more corals, or the faster that corals grow, the more they suck up or use up calcium out of the water.
And our pH buffer.
pH is very important, whether it be a coral reef tank or a fish-only system.
Yeah, I introduced that one straight into the tank. So, we're going to drop the lights.
The reason for the elevated lighting system is twofold. One, with it in the up position, allows me the greatest access into the tank. In the lower position, it allows the greatest intensity of light into the tank.
Let's go clean the front of the tank.
As with all acrylic aquariums, you want to use a cleaner or polish that is specific to acrylic aquariums. You would never want to use ammonia-based cleaners such as Windex on an acrylic aquarium, because over time, the ammonia within the Windex would tend to dry out the acrylic, at the least cause the acrylic surface to frost, which would be unattractive.
And so that's how we overhauled the 150-gallon coral reef tank. Whether it be to your liking or not, it's what works for me as a service person. And keep in mind, I'm only addressing this tank once every 2 weeks, so you have to do it in a manner that works not only for the service side, but for the coral side. And that doesn't always work. So I've got to take off. I got a dentist account that's got some fish we're losing. I need to dash and find out what's going on. See you soon.
So this has been my version, in an extreme situation, how to eliminate a bad algae problem. There are many different methods how to try to prevent algae growth within the reef aquarium. Those I haven't really discovered yet. It appears as though simply old reef tanks don't die. They just get algae problems.